Our third lightning talk is from Ellen Collins from the Research Information Network, and Ellen has been working on the Open UK project, and the subject of her lightning talk is Open Access Monographs, What Have We Learned?
As David said, my name's Ellen. I work for the Research Information Network, which is a small policy consultancy working on scholarly communications. But I'm here today to talk about our Open UK, which is a long-term AHRC and JISC-funded project on open access for monographs. When I sat down to write this talk and thought about the title, I realised I might have been slightly ambitious. I'm happy and relieved to tell you that we have learned more than 7 minutes worth of stuff in the last 4 years. So I'm not going to try and cover it all. What I will do is give you a very quick overview of the project, followed by some of the key themes that I think are particularly important or interesting for the people who are here at this conference. So Open UK is a 5-year research programme with 2 main strands. The first is a 3-year matched pairs experiment, looking at what happens to sales and usage when you make a book open access. To run that strand of the work, we've been working with initially 5, now 6 UK-based publishers of all sizes and backgrounds. So we've got from very small university presses through to quite large commercial university and other publishers. And we have been tracking sales and usage over a 3-year period from September 2011. That will be finishing in September of this year, and we expect that we'll be able to publish some results either late this year or early next year. The second strand of the work is a set of linked qualitative investigations looking at the wider environment for monographs and thinking about how open access for monographs might fit into that existing environment. There are a lot of stakeholders who have an interest in monograph and book publishing. Publishers, obviously, universities, learned societies, researchers themselves, librarians, intermediaries, funders, all have an interest in monograph publishing as it works at the moment, and would all have to be involved in any change towards open access for monograph publishing. And that's what we're looking at with the qualitative research programme. How would their attitudes, behaviours, policies, approaches need to change? I want to stress that this is a real-world experiment, and that has been both a benefit and a challenge for us. We're only looking at a really small number of titles, 90 books altogether, and in the context of lists that might run into the thousands, we're not looking at what happens if you make a wholesale shift of the entire publishing system. We're looking at what happens if you take a very small group of books and make them open access. But on the plus side, working with this small group of books has helped us to understand some of the challenges and problems that we might face if we were to see open access publishing for books grow slowly, which is much more likely than seeing a wholesale, very rapid change. And that's what I want to talk about now, based primarily on the findings of the qualitative research programme that I mentioned. The first thing that I want to highlight is open access for monographs means change for everybody. All the stakeholders that I just mentioned will need to change. In some cases, very high-level changes are needed, changes in how you think about what you do, what your job is as a librarian or as a publisher or as an aggregator or as a funder, but also change in surprisingly detailed ways. One thing that won't change, because open access is a business model, it's not a publishing model, it's a business model, so we're not expecting to see any changes really to the writing process, the editorial process, and indeed a lot of the production process for books. And most publishers who are offering open access for books don't even ask the question, would you like to make this book open access, until that book has been finally accepted and the contract is being drawn up. But there will be big changes in other aspects of how stakeholders think about monographs and their role in producing monographs. The second thing I want to highlight is the supply chain. That is a big challenge. At the moment, as one publisher puts it, the supply chain is set up to sell, and that makes it very difficult to deal with a zero price in the system for content. We've uncovered issues relating to communicating Creative Commons rights through metadata. It's not easy to make sure that those rights remain associated with the content as it goes through the system from the publisher to the end user. It's also can be a challenge to ensure the benefits of open access don't get wiped out by a blanket application of DRM. by aggregators. Obviously, it's understandable that aggregators aren't going to change their entire policies for a handful of books, but at the same time, if your user is accessing the book through an ebook platform which has applied DRM, they're still going to be able to download it for just 3 days at a time or not necessarily be able to do everything they want to with it, and that's a challenge. There's also challenges for libraries in terms of discoverability and long-term access. They want reassurance about that. They want to make sure that open access content is getting onto the same platform as their other ebooks that they're supplying to users and that it stays there in perpetuity. The third thing I want to highlight is a strong enthusiasm for change on all sides. Now, you might not think this if you are used to listening to humanities researchers talk about open access. Enthusiasm might not be the word that you associate with that. But in fact, when it comes to books, a lot of them see that open access could represent a solution to some of the challenges that Francis was talking about, or not talking about, to do with the problems of getting the content that you want getting published. They recognise it's a somewhat failing system and that open access could represent a solution. Funders are keen to see innovation. They're not mandating, as we heard yesterday from Stephen, because they don't think we're ready yet, but they want to see continued experimentation. And publishers are responding to that by providing lots of different models. So the question really is, how do we turn that enthusiasm into a strategic roadmap that will get us from where we are now to where we want to be? And how, most importantly, are we going to pay for that? That's a question that we haven't been able to answer. But we do think that in terms of the move to open access, continued experimentation and diversity of models will be key. We don't expect to see one dominant model in the near future, which is correct for books because it's a very heterogeneous environment that we're working in. The final thing to highlight really is that with open access for books, we're working with a moving target. The monograph environment is changing irrespective of all this work that's happening around open access for books. And it's important that open access integrates itself with those changes rather than trying to work against them or indeed trying to ignore them. We need to make sure that open access is working with library moves towards outsourcing content hosting, with publisher moves towards HTML1 publishing, with developments in third-party systems such as Onyx. So these changes that are happening anyway in the monograph environment offer an opportunity to make open access for monographs happen in a comfortable and less disruptive way. And really, it's important that everybody who's involved with the book publishing system, the book supply system, thinks about open access monographs, because I agree with Francis that they're not going anywhere. They are here to stay. So finally, if I've whetted your appetite for the Open UK project, there's a lot more information available on our website, and I'm always happy to answer questions by email, post, Twitter, carrier pigeon, so fire away.